Pokemon is the biggest media franchise in the world, through its video games, movies, and even toys. And success like that is bound to create some copycats. With the dozens of Pokemon knockoffs that exist, some are good, some are bad, but there's one that had so much potential, just to end up letting down just about everyone who was willing to give it a chance. I'm talking about Temtem, and how it went from being one of the most anticipated titles from the start of 2020 to having fewer average concurrent players than Wallpaper Engine just 8 months later. Now, when I say Temtem was one of the most anticipated titles from the beginning of the year, I don't mean people were just excited about it just before release, as the project had been in the works and people were excited about it since Temtem was announced back in May of 2018 with a Kickstarter. Temtem's developer Crema announced their intent to make an MMO, Pokemon-like game, and set a donation goal of $70,000 to crowdfund their game, offering gifts to backers that ranged from a digital wallpaper pack to the ability to get a named character in the game and helping to design a route. The hype surrounding a harder, online Pokemon-style game and these gifts were incredibly successful at getting backers, as Temtem received half of their $70,000 goal in just one day, and met their goal entirely just 4 days later in early June of 2018. The backings didn't stop there, however, as over the 34 days the Kickstarter was active, Kramer received almost $600,000 from just under 12,000 donors who were all excited to see this dream become a reality. This additional money helped the drive reach their stretch goals, which included a Nuzlocke game mode, mounts, releases on new platforms, in-game tournaments, and more quality of life updates. It would be over a year before the game was released on Steam, and all of the backers were eagerly waiting for the title to be available. Or they were playing the alpha version, initially released in November of 2018, to get a taste of what their hard-earned money was going towards. Temtem was released in January of 2020 on Steam, and while many understood that it was an early access title and some issues were bound to happen, not many would have fully expected the scope of the problems that occurred. Day 1 was plagued with server instability, with players waiting in queues only to get kicked from the game shortly after logging in. Loads of players couldn't even get their starter the first day, and plenty of people were left disappointed with the issues that were preventing them from playing a game that had a $30 price tag. Crema tried their best to keep the server stable and ensure everyone had a chance to play, rolling out hotfix after hotfix. But some of the updates brought about their own issues that then required the server to be restarted in order to fix the issues that came with the update. Crema's small team of only 18 employees did not appear to be fully equipped to handle the issues that come alongside the release of such a popular concept, and the instability and bugs players were experiencing caused the experience of most to suffer. Despite all this, however, Temtem had almost 30,000 concurrent players at its peak on the day of release, and between the copies given away to Kickstarter backers and those who purchased on Steam, it still saw a relatively large amount of success for such an ambitious indie game with over 500,000 copies sold in its first month. Temtem was branded as a more difficult, more serious online multiplayer version of Pokemon, and they really delivered on that. The game's mechanics are largely similar to those of Pokemon, with turn-based combat, type advantages and disadvantages, abilities for each of your Temtem, breeding, item usage, and even a similar user interface. The story follows the player character as they explore the world known as the Airborne Archipelago, doing quests and capturing Temtem to become a powerful Temtem tamer. It largely follows the same format as Pokemon games, as the game is largely linear, and the goal is to visit each dojo and defeat their leaders. The differences start to arise when looking into the details of the game itself and the steps that Crema used to make the game more unique. The most obvious of these differences is how every trainer battle is a double battle, with each side sending out 2 Temtem to battle alongside one another. Many wild battles are 2v2 as well, but there is a chance of running into a solo wild Temtem that will then make it a 2v1. Within these battles, each Temtem can use moves that drain the Temtem's stamina, a resource that can cause a Temtem to become exhausted if it is fully lost. Stamina costs on each move can vary, with stronger moves typically taking up more stamina and weaker moves costing less. But if a Temtem's stamina drops to 0 or below 0, it becomes exhausted and cannot make a move the following turn. In addition, if a move is used to drop stamina below 0, the Temtem will lose health equal to double the amount that was dropped below 0. And also be exhausted the next turn in addition. Small amounts of stamina are recovered at the end of each turn, and Temtem has a rest option as well, which will cause more stamina to be recovered at the cost of one of your moves. The choice of moves can be a key part of battling in Temtem, as some of them have synergies that will activate when used alongside certain teammates. For example, the move Energy Manipulation will deal extra damage and add an additional turn of status if used alongside a Nature-type ally. Utilizing these synergies is a massive part of the game, and makes building a team much more complicated than it typically is when playing Pokemon. Alongside all these points of difference, Temtem also has effectively no randomness whatsoever. It has a strict damage calculation formula, moves that apply status will always apply status, and it will always last for a certain number of turns. There are no critical hits, and moves cannot miss. This is meant to ensure that a more skilled player will win more frequently and create more strategy within the game, but it can also lead to some teams being statistically worse than others. So it's obvious that Temtem, while it follows a similar formula to Pokemon, is a very different game from the Pocket Monsters games we've all come to know. But why have we heard almost nothing about it since its release, and seen its player counts drop from its peak of about 40,000 concurrent tamers to just under 2,000 on average in just a few months? First things first, we must address the fact that Temtem is still an early access game. It is unfinished and is not projected to be completed until 2021 when its main console releases will come out. Plenty of the game is still walled off behind work in progress signs, and while most of the existing bugs have been addressed, it is inevitable that more will pop up as more content arrives. Alongside the game not being complete, leading to players running out of content, the mechanics themselves are not particularly rewarding, leading many players to stop once a roadblock begins to get particularly frustrating. A large issue that I personally ran into is that training up your Temtem is tedious and difficult early in the game, and there's a significant difficulty spike right at the beginning. Before completing the first dojo, the highest level Temtem you can find in the wild are level 14, and the dojo master has 6 Temtem between level 17 and 22. With the way that Temtem's level scaling works, where you get significantly less experience the higher level you are than the Temtem you're defeating, you have to defeat dozens of wild Temtem just to gain a level or two to try to catch up to the dojo master. The double battle style, stamina costs, and moves that cannot be used on the first turn of combat make it difficult to knock out both opposing Temtem in one move, even in wild battles, so your team will be chipped down while grinding, requiring frequent trips back to healing stations while gaining a minimal amount of experience. Training up weaker Temtem is difficult as well, as it can be difficult to keep them alive long enough to gain a meaningful amount of experience while still fighting weaker Temtem in the wild, just to get it strong enough to take on the first dojo master. It certainly doesn't help that this game's version of the experience share is not available until after the first dojo is completed, and is only available through a side quest that is pretty easily missed. Tedious grinding aside, however, Crema's decision to remove RNG from this game leaves many of the battles to feel flat and boring. There are no damage rolls, so there is no anticipation about whether or not a move will knock out an opposing Temtem, if the first time it hit did just under half of the opponent's health. The lack of crits and no praying for a potential status condition to save you, like a freeze or paralysis in Pokemon, causes battles to be extremely repetitive and, quite frankly, hard to sit through. Even the Temtem's traits or abilities have no randomness at all, as the majority of them are either triggered stat increases, increased or decreased damage by a set percentage, or immunities to certain status conditions. The implementation of guaranteed status is nice, but no RNG removes all hope if a battle comes down to the wire and you're able to 100% accurately predict what will happen next with no chance for a comeback. Along with the lack of RNG, stamina being a limiting factor in battles creates a sense that you get punished for the entire battle for attempting to use strong moves, especially in the early game. Stamina is a scarce resource, and many of the moves with high stamina costs are not even always strong enough to one-shot a wild Temtem, let alone that of another tamer. This makes battles with tamers with multiple Temtem even more painful to go through, as you'll use a strong move in an attempt to take out an opposing Temtem, just to find that it didn't do as much as you had hoped, and now you're hamstrung by the stamina limitation for as long as that Temtem is on the field. At this point, you can either push through it and take the HP loss for overexerting your Temtem for a KO, or be stuck using weaker moves, running the risk of still not nabbing the KO and then taking damage from the opponent in return. Even if your Temtem gets knocked out and you revive it, it still only restores a portion of its overall stamina. It's an interesting concept and allows for more strategy, but the limitation in moves you have access to at the start of the game leads this to be a frustrating mechanic in the game. There's always the option of having a Temtem rest to restore some stamina, but that still only restores 15% of the overall bar and effectively wastes a turn. So it still takes damage, and using another strong move puts you right back in the same situation you were just in. So overall, do I recommend Temtem? Quite honestly, no. A lot of the issues I touched on in this video are related to the first dozen hours of content, and if that's the introduction people are getting to the game, then there's not a good chance they'll stick around. It was an insanely ambitious project, and I respect Crema for trying to make it work, but the frustrating mechanics and difficulty curve that can only be solved by tedious grinding leaves a bad taste in new players' mouths. And while it may have a great art style and fantastic concept, the execution leaves a lot to be desired. So many people wanted Temtem to be a franchise to rival Pokemon, and maybe with its official release, some of these issues will be fixed. But 8 months into early access, the player base has shrunk to a fraction of what it originally was, and it will be incredibly difficult for Temtem to make a comeback without a finished game and some major adjustments. With that though, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you later.